The countryside was quiet under a silver moon, the kind of night when every sound travels for miles. Yet one sound broke the stillness. A long, piercing howl rose from an old barn that had stood abandoned for decades, its roof sagging under the weight of years. At first, those who lived nearby thought it was just a stray dog passing through. But the howls did not fade. They grew sharper, more urgent, carrying something in them that made the hair on the back of the neck stand up. It was not the sound of hunger. It was the sound of warning. When a passing farmer finally came close enough to see, he froze. The figure in the moonlight was unmistakable. It was Rex, the decorated K-9 of the county police department, his black vest marked boldly with the word police. But why was he alone in the middle of the night? Rex's paws were muddy, his fur streaked with dirt, his chest heaving from exertion. Yet his eyes were locked on the barn door, unblinking. He circled the entrance like a sentry, occasionally pawing at the warped wood, then throwing back his head to let out another haunting cry. The farmer stepped closer, calling out softly, but Rex did not move. Instead, his howl dropped to a low growl, deep and warning, as though telling the man to keep back. Something in that stance, in the tension rippling through the dog's muscles, made the farmer reach for his phone and dial the sheriff's office. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled up, their headlights cutting through the mist that had begun to settle over the fields. Officers stepped out, expecting perhaps an injured animal trapped inside, or some wild creature taking shelter from the cold. None of them were prepared for what they would find. As the lead officer approached, Rex's tail stiffened. He stepped directly in front of the barn door, blocking the way, then glanced back at them with a look that could almost be read as urgency. His nose pressed to the gap in the wood, and his ears pricked at some sound only he could hear. One officer tried coaxing him away with a soft voice and a bit of jerky from his pocket. Rex ignored it entirely. He pressed his shoulder to the door, nails scraping against the planks, the low growl in his throat vibrating like a warning drumbeat. The other officer frowned, recognizing the focus of a working dog on a mission. The night seemed to grow heavier around them. The barn loomed above, its windows black, the wind whispering through cracks in the wood. Then, faintly, from somewhere within, there came a sound. It was not an animal's cry. It was human, muffled, weak, almost drowned out by the wind. The officers exchanged a sharp glance. They moved forward together, pushing at the warped doors. The hinges groaned in protest before giving way, and a gust of stale air rushed out, carrying the scent of dust and rot. In an instant, Rex slipped past them into the darkness, his nails clicking on the warped floorboards. The beam of a flashlight caught him in the far corner, nose to the ground. He was pawing furiously at a mound of old hay. Beneath it, the wood looked different, as though a trapdoor had been buried under years of neglect. Rex paused just long enough to look back at them, barking once, sharp and insistent. The officers rushed over, clearing away the hay. The wood was damp and swollen, but together they forced it open. The creak of the hinges was followed by the faint echo of voices, trembling and hoarse. 3 pairs of eyes looked up at them from the shadows below, filled with exhaustion and disbelief. The flashlight beams cut through the darkness of the cellar, revealing 3 hikers huddled together. Their faces were pale, their clothes torn, and their bodies shivering from cold and hunger. One of them tried to speak, but the words dissolved into a rasping cough. Rex stood at the edge of the opening, peering down at them with his ears forward and tail still, his body tense but no longer aggressive. The urgency in his posture had shifted into something steadier, protective. He had found what he had been guarding all along. The officers moved quickly, radioing for medical assistance and lowering blankets into the cellar. One by one, they helped the hikers up into the open air, their movements shaky but determined. Each step they took out of that pit felt like a victory wrestled back from the edge of disaster. As the last hiker emerged, he reached out a trembling hand toward Rex. The dog stepped forward, sniffing his fingers before giving a single, deliberate wag of his tail. It was as if he understood that the danger had passed, that his mission was complete. The hikers explained in broken sentences how they had been caught in a sudden storm while exploring the countryside. Seeking shelter in the old barn, they had stepped onto rotted boards that gave way, dropping them into the cellar below. Injured and trapped, they had spent days in darkness. They had tried shouting for help, but the storm's winds had drowned out their voices. No one had come near the barn, no one except Rex. Somehow, through the distance and the noise, he had heard them, and he had refused to leave until someone else heard them too. The paramedics arrived, wrapping the hikers in thermal blankets and checking their vital signs. The officers stood back, watching as Rex paced near the ambulance, his eyes never leaving the rescued group. Even with the danger over, he stayed close, unwilling to let them out of his sight. Back at the station later that night, word of Rex's rescue spread quickly. Officers who had worked alongside him for years shook their heads in quiet amazement. They knew he was skilled, but this was something beyond training. It was instinct, loyalty, and perhaps something deeper that no manual could teach. The hikers returned a few days later, walking into the station with smiles and tears. They carried a large framed photograph of Rex, taken moments after their rescue, to present as a thank you. One of them knelt to wrap his arms around the dog's neck, whispering words only he could hear. Rex stood perfectly still, leaning into the embrace. His handler, standing nearby, simply said, "He does not forget. When he decides to protect someone, he will protect them until the end." It was a truth every officer in that building had already seen with their own eyes. In the quiet that followed, it was clear that this rescue would be remembered for years to come, not as an extraordinary feat of a trained canine, but as the moment a living guardian stood watch over strangers and refused to give up. If you were moved by Rex's incredible rescue, do not forget to like and subscribe. More true stories of courage and loyalty are on the way, and they will leave you just as inspired.